Welcome to CEO Zone's Meet the Speaker series. Today, we're very honored to have Tyler. Tyler is a TED Talk expert, Tyler Cerny. He focuses on teaching others how to be keynote speakers, which means he is one of the best keynote speakers that we have ever watched on video here at CEO Zones. He also is an author, a thought leader, and he helps you how to find your life's purpose in 3 questions. His TED Talk is less than 10 minutes, very powerful. To the CEOs out there in our audience that has not watched his TED Talk, go ahead and drive him over 3 million views because it is worth your 10 minutes. I don't care if you have a purpose statement, if you paid attention to Covey in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, or even some of the purpose driven books that are out there, which I won't mention those right at the moment, but you're now meeting one of the world's most watched TED Talk performers. He's in the top 500. He is a Christian. He loves to share his story with warmth and hope and get you to your purpose. He works with audiences all over the world. So we're going to ask him a little bit about that because CEOs naturally have employees on multiple continents. So we're going to maybe start out in that vein there, Tyler, to give you a heads up. And my very first question is going to be held up just for a minute because welcome, Tyler. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to share this time with you to give a lot of value to the listeners today.
Thank you. So I guess my first question may not be the audience's first question because you are a keynote speaker's coach, if you will, and many CEOs give. They're always communicating. They're always selling, whether it be internally, externally, to suppliers, to customers, sometimes even to their own executive team. They have to sell a hard idea. But how did you get involved in becoming a TED Talk expert or becoming someone that coaches the coach? How did that get started for you?
Sure, absolutely. That's a great question. Well, I always tell people, even when I was a very little boy, when I was playing make believe in the backyard with my brother back in the day, when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, I would present and preach to imaginary audiences in my backyard. And so I always was called to speak. I never knew what that would look like as an adult, but I always knew that I had a message to share, and I always knew that I wanted to share, I wanted to speak and inspire people as well. And so that was kind of the foundation of it as a young boy. And then, as I got older, I got into sports. And so that really put me being around a lot of other individuals, went to school again, still trying to figure out certain things. The Lord even put a message on my heart, even in college, and was like, Tyler, I want you to become a pastor. I heard it in prayer. And it's evolved to today where I'm like, Lord, I want to be a pastor, but I also want to make money. And so one of the things that always gravitated towards me was merging the two worlds. How can I take the church world where I grew up in a very traditional setting, think of wooden pews, stained glass windows, and I'm very grateful for my upbringing because it gave me the foundation of Christianity. And through that experience, I always saw a lot of people that were struggling financially in the church. And then I also got introduced to the personal development side world where a lot of people were successful financially, but no one would really talk about Christ. And so I always wanted to bridge the two. And so again, this is percolating as I'm developing my career and developing what I wanted to do. And I always knew I wanted to get into business. And this is part of the process of finding your life's purpose, because this is what I also speak to when I speak at colleges and high schools and the younger generations too, of what the heck should I do with my life, right? And so for me, I exposed myself to a lot of different things. I remember, I sold insurance at a young age. I worked with different people from the alumni network at my high school, reaching out to them saying, hey, I see that you run a company. Would you be open to seeing if I can get an internship or help out? So I was just exposing myself to a lot of different things. And you kind of alluded to it. What I realized at a young age, communication is going to be the thread of everything, right? Whether I'm communicating to myself at a personal level, of communicating to myself, getting clear on what my values are, what my mission is, what my goals are. That's the first level of communication. Then the second level of communication is then how am I communicating with others on Zoom calls, in person, building relationships. And so that kind of led me into sales. That's how I got into business consulting and sales and just commuting with other people around me. And then eventually, the highest level of communication is then leadership and speaking on stage and being able to influence people on stage to make a decision, and ultimately building a company and building a brand, which then attract team members and different clients and team members and people to basically buy into what it is that you're communicating, and buy into your mission, your values, and your vision. And so through that process, I was always putting myself in situations where I would communicate with others. And for that, it looked like as a sales or business consulting. And then on the speaking side, as that continued to grow and scale, I joined Toastmasters. I don't know if you've ever joined Toastmasters, but at a very, very early on, kind of how the one that it was structured, the one that I joined, it was in San Diego, and they had two parts. They had a table topics, they called it, where it was impromptu learning. So basically, I give you a topic, let's say Chick-fil-A, and then you have 30 seconds to speak off the top of your mind on Chick-fil-A for 30 seconds. And then they'll, once you're done, they then select someone else in the crowd. They'll be like, pick someone else, and then they give you another topic. And so that was the table topics. It was just impromptu and improvised. And with that, I was really good with that. I was able to win awards with that. And then also, too, they had the second part of the meeting, which was prepared presentations, which they would select three people to prepare for the next week. So they gave you a time in advance, whether it was a week or a couple of weeks, we had a schedule.
Right.
So then I started winning those awards, because what will happen is the whole group will collectively critique you, give you feedback. And that's when it really hit me, where it's like, you know what? I can actually do this at a high level, and I could actually do this and, maybe even build a business around it. And again, I didn't really know what that looked like at that point, but I was comfortable speaking in front of people. I invested in some other coaches, and there was a comedy coach I invested in. He taught me the improvision as well, how to improvise, and he had similar exercises. And then as I just stayed consistent, but as I started my consulting company, that was about 15 years ago, we helped personal brands grow and scale. And one of the personal brands that we helped and we worked with was a guy by the name of Tony Robbins. And so he was really an individual that I learned through osmosis. I've probably seen Tony Robbins give his keynote about 18 times, going city to city to city. And I don't know if you've ever been to one of his events, Bill, but he lights coals on fire, about a 3 or 4 inch flame, and you walk over it. And so for me, that was one of the highest levels of persuasion and influence and communication that I've ever seen. Communicating at the time, it was about 20,000 people at an LA convention center, not only walk on fire, and then he also promoted different products, services, and in the sum of making millions of dollars in a weekend. And so I learned through osmosis, was part of the live event business, and did a lot of with that before COVID. That was like maybe 2 or 3 years leading up into COVID. And then through that process, I was just in the right rooms with business owners, people that were business leaders, where I got invited to speak at podcasts, masterminds, and I just continue to practice and refine my craft, refine my stories, and continue to find what people were looking for, what problems were people facing, what solutions could I provide, what part of my message is relevant to them. And another thing is started recording the audience. And so a lot of people will record themselves, but a really great hack is then recording the audience, because there's certain stories, there's certain jokes, there's certain things that you say that will elicit a response within the audience. And those are things that I'm really leaning in towards, because if I get great response, then it's now just basically another check mark that I can add to my next talk, because if I continue to get feedback from the audience, then I can continue to pile it up into the keynote presentation, which was the TEDx talk. And that was the one, by the grace of God, I always tell people, the TEDx talk came about. We were able to reach close to 3 million people, become one of the top 500 most watched talks, like you mentioned. And that was a culmination of my life experiences, me transitioning out of sports, me transitioning out of consultancy, doing a lot of different things, me living abroad, me moving back to the States, where I had to get clear on what my life's purpose was every time I started this next step in this new chapter of my life. And so that was really the culmination. And I realized that a lot of people do struggle with that. A lot of people struggle to find fulfillment, struggle to find purpose. And you can do that on the personal and the professional level. So that's what I tell people I do now, is I help people personally find their life's purpose, and I help businesses scale and grow their purpose so they can reach and impact more people as well.
So when your TED Talk went viral, what surprised your family, or what was the unexpected feedback when you realized smokes, this thing's going global.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. My family, and my parents specifically, they've always been so supportive. They're one of those people that, if I play sports and even if I do something wrong or good, they're like, great job, Tyler. They were always very, very supportive of me. And so they always knew it was going to do good. And whether it reached 10 people or reached close to 3 million people, they were still going to be like, great work, Tyler. And that was really cool about my TEDx experience is that it wasn't Cleveland, Ohio, my alma mater, and it was where my family's from. So they all got a chance to come and visit me. And so that's what made it really special. But, one of the things that a lot of people, including my family, have said that was surprising is I talk about the cycle of unfulfilling purpose. And that's where a lot of people stay because a lot of purpose driven talks, they talk about how to find your purpose and different strategies to do that. And that's good. And I talk about that in my talk too. But I also want to address what's keeping people from their purpose. And the first part of my talk, I share that where basically the cycle of unfulfilling purpose, you find yourself in a place of a transition, right? Something happens to you. You transition, whether you graduate high school, graduate college, you leave the sport you're going to be a professional at, you get married, you start your own business, something traumatic happens to you, someone dies in your family, whatever the case may be, you now have to step into this new chapter of life, basically never being the same as it was before. And so now that first step is kind of confusion, where you're not really sure what you want to do. You're still kind of in the discovery phase. Some people, it's depressing because they know exactly what they want to do, and then they get to a point where not really sure what they want to do. And a great example I share with this is a guy by the name of Michael Phelps, one of the greatest swimmers of all time, right? And he hits the pinnacle of his career, wins all these gold medals, and then once he retires, then now what the heck is he going to do? Well, he then goes into a deep state of depression because his identity is a swimmer, and if he no longer swims, he no longer quote unquote has an identity. And so most athletes, most military, they struggle with the same exact situation where their identity is this one thing, but what happens when they stop doing it? And again, this period of confusion, depression, not really sure what's going on, that can be stretched out for a very long period of time, maybe for a couple months, a couple years, or maybe even a lifetime for some individuals because they struggle with that transition. But eventually you move on to the next part of the cycle, which is you start to get some clarity and you start to find self-fulfillment and some purpose where you start to, you start putting another foot in front of the other. You start maybe you get a job that you like, you get a consult, you do something that starts putting you on the right track. Well, I tell people knowing your life purpose is different than having purpose because purpose is just the reason why you do something. I could be going to a job and I could be doing it to provide for my family. It doesn't mean it's aligned with my life's purpose, but I have purpose behind why I may absolutely hate that job, but the purpose why I show up every single day is to provide for my family. And for most people, that's where it's at. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the last part of the step in the cycle is, does this give you peace and fulfillment? Because if I'm doing this thing and I'm like, you know what, I have purpose, I found the job, I found the situation, I found the relationship, whatever the case it may be for that individual, does it fuel you to want to do more of it? Do I have peace? Am I excited to go out? Am I willing to tap dance out of bed every morning to do it every single day? Because if I'm not, now I start back right from square one. I'm going to then push myself out and lead myself into another transition. And I have to start the cycle all over again. But in reality, we need to step ourselves outside of the cycle and find things that give us life. Because what I realize is that there are things professionally that we can do that not only, I don't want to say things aren't easy because everything has its own challenges. One of the sayings I always tell people, the grass is greener where you water it. And so every process, every career, everything that you choose to do, it's going to require work. But even taking a step further and saying, like, how can I be the very best at this one thing? Am I that committed to take this as far as I can? Because if I'm not, for me, that's just an unsustainable model where I could do it for short term, then it's just going to push me into something new. And then that vicious cycle is just kind of where I found myself, in my early 20s and even like over about a decade at a time where I kept finding myself doing something, was ecstatic by it, but then I would transition into something else. And I realized that a lot of people struggle with that too. A lot of people face that. And so to answer your question about what kind of surprised people is that I kind of went into that cycle of unfulfillment And the surprising part is like, Kyle, you explained my situation so spot on. And it's like, I've been there myself. That's why I've been able to talk about it and share it from that perspective, because I've been there. And so that's why I can relate and resonate with a lot of audiences that I speak to as well.
So our series is called Meet the Speaker, but I know you do consulting, but there's probably CEOs that when they're in transition, they go back through that. Let's say they abruptly get left go of their organization where the board says, unfortunately, today's your last day. That would cause them to go through one of those cycles, or the cycle of retiring when a public company CEO, they walk the globe, they run the globe, they do all these things, and now what? And I might share a little bit of that myself, where I trotted the globe and came home, and CEO Zones was born, right, in my retirement. So
Yeah,
my
and that leads into the next part of the last part of the talk, which is, what do you do? Like, now what, right? Like, let's say you find yourself in that. Most of the time, and this is another thing that a lot of people, when they heard me share my message, is that most of the time people are in the right vehicle. So let's say you transition into that consulting position, that business, you start that new company, whatever that looks like, or you close it down to start something new. During that period, it then goes back to the first question, which is, who am I called to serve? Right? Because if I'm running this organization and it's just like really draining a lot out of me, I'm leading to burnout, it's not fulfilling, it's causing me a lot of stress. Well, I need to, before I'd be like, you know what, let's get rid of this company or just shift gears 100%. I need to really get clear with, who am I serving when I'm showing up to work every single day? Because what I found, there's three levels of service, and most business owners and most entrepreneurs, when they start off, they do it to serve themselves, right? They want the financial freedom, they want the nice things. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that gets you moving. The next level is, I want to do it because I want to genuinely serve others, serve the client, serve my team members, provide financial freedom for my team, provide financial freedom for my clients. But we've all faced those situations where we do everything for the client and the client still may not be happy. Because if I am so dedicated, and this happens in marriage too, where if you're so dedicated to serving your spouse, then you're still going to come up short. Where the ultimate level of service is then serving the creator. And I tell people all the time that I report to work as the man upstairs, my CEO. And so one of the great sayings and prayers I always like to do is, Lord, my mind, my heart, my hands, everything is yours, Lord. Put me to work today. And when you say that prayer, what's going to happen is the Lord's going to put you to work. There's tremendous amounts of opportunities around each and every single one of us. And so if I can kind of get clear with that, where I kind of shift the narrative, where it's like, Lord, this is your business. I'm just, I'm a steward of this business, these people's payroll. I'm a steward of these payrolls. I'm a steward of these clients. I'm a steward of the cash flow. Because one of my favorite mentors is Dr. Miles Monroe, rest in peace. But he talks about this. Running a church, he was a pastor. Running a church is like running a business. You have to manage people and money, right? And that's really what it is. You're managing these resources to the highest level if you're the CEO. And how can we maximize it? And if I'm doing it to serve and honor the Lord, then the Lord's going to give me favor. He's going to give me peace of mind. He's going to give me clarity. He's going to give me direction. But if I do it in a place where, it's all about me, it's all about what I can get out of the company, what I can get out from the position and the status, then what, in my opinion, and where I found myself at, is in that cycle of unfulfilling purpose, right? So sometimes we just need to ask the different question, who are we serving? Get clear on that. We do it to serve the Lord. But if we get to a point where it's like, you know what, Lord, like, I did just take this position for the financials, I did do these things for personal gain, then now you're up to make a decision. What are you going to do? Are you going to take the risk and start something new and start a new venture that's aligned with it or not? Because that's going to require work. And that's the route that I've taken. And it requires more work and dedication because, again, it requires something, a building of your own. But in terms of fulfillment and peace of mind and just, happiness and joy, it's sustainable. Because at the end of the day, whatever we do, once we get to a certain level, we then have to reinvent ourselves and get to that next level, right? So this process, this skill set is never going to, you're always going to use it. The situation is never going to go away. But once you become a little bit more experienced with it, and this is what I share with people, then they're going to feel more confident moving into these areas of their life where they may not have a lot of experience in, because we all like certainty. No one really likes uncertainty. But if we're able to lean into this uncertainty and have the faith in God and say, hey, Lord, this is what I plan on doing. This is my goals and these are my plans. Does this align with yours? And am I doing it for all the right reasons? And if you partner with the creator of the universe, I tell people you're gonna end up all right. You're gonna do all right. And so that's what I really try to tell people and get clear on who are you serving, because if you serve people at the highest level, then the next question is what problems are you called to solve? Which then, if you answer those two questions, now you got a business model. If I get crystal clear, and that's what you've done, Bill. You've got this community, a group of CEOs and business leaders together, right? And that's the individual, because you were a CEO and you've done a lot of stuff in business. And one of the problems that I see in business and entrepreneurship is loneliness. So now you've been able to create this amazing community. People can come together, but that's a business model. Who am I called to serve, and what problems am I called to solve? If I can get crystal clear on those two things, now an entry level entrepreneur, someone that's just starting off in business, if they get clear on those two questions, then they can have some success. And then the last thing is, how are you called to solve that problem? Where this is where you can get creative. If a CEO or a business owner is struggling with loneliness and you want to build a community, there's a lot of different platforms and different ways you can provide community to a CEO. And that's where, your creativity, your uniqueness, and I call it that flair, that's what makes that little spice, that's where your creativity and uniqueness will really make it different, make it stand out. Because once you do that, now it's one on one. Now what you do isn't something that's, you can get from anywhere else, because this is hand designed by Bill Forrester, right? And that's what the Lord has done with every single one of us. He's hand designed us. We all have things that excite us. We all have things that we absolutely hate to do. Well, let's lean into the things that we like to do that excite us and fire us up, because now we're going to be eager to continue to do those things. And if we're in a position to do that, we're going to stay disciplined and have success in that area of life.
So on my screen, it says Ted Tyler.
Yeah, TED. It should be TEDx, Tyler.
Okay, we're
Let's
missing
add
the
that
X.
there. No, yeah, my name is Tyler Cerny, but some people call me TEDx Tyler just because they saw my talk.
Okay.
But I'm not associated with TEDx. I don't work for TEDx. I just gave a talk at TEDx, and
Okay.
it's created a
Well, you did
massive
more than
impact on
just
life.
gave a talk. You're changing lives, whether that's
Yes, thank you.
true or not. So, thinking of a CEO who is a speaker and they want to do a TED Talk, what are some of the do's and don'ts if they're a CEO, already have, and in our community, we're looking for CEOs that are a billion or larger in annual revenue. So let's
Sure,
assume they already have hundreds of employees, possibly in 10 to 50 countries. I do have former clients that were in 100 countries, but anyway, 130 countries. But
sure,
but in any event, they have a huge audience already internally. They're probably a gifted communicator, or they wouldn't, or they have someone on their team that makes sure the right things get communicated. But let's assume they're a gifted
sure.
CEO communicator. Now they want to do a TED Talk. What are some of the key things that they need to know or think about before they call you and say, "Hey, I need help"? What are the things they should be thinking about?
Sure, that's a great question. One of the things I always tell people is if we got 100 people in a room and we were to all to just share our story and we didn't say anything more, nothing less, and we just all left that event hearing 100 people share their story, we would all leave with an elevated level of consciousness, because we can always learn from someone's story, especially if they've gone through a lot of adversity and they have a lot of experience to share. And so with the individual like that you're mentioning, I mean, these are the ideal people to give a TEDx talk, because another thing that I will say to people too is one of the highest paid, highly sought after speakers right now is a guy by the name of Elon Musk. And if you look up Elon Musk and ever see him speak, it's not because he's this amazing communicator and he's just so eloquent. In fact, sometimes he's a bit awkward, but it's what he's done off the stage is what allows people to want him on the stage. And so I would tell those individuals is you've already done the hard work. You've already, built the successful thing, built a successful company. And those is what gives you permission to then speak on the stage. Because when I tell people who want to become, speakers, or they want to speak on stage and share for their personal brand, one of the things I ask them is like, are you qualified to speak on the topic that you're going to be speaking on? And if the answer is no, then we need to go back to the drawing board and we need to get more experience. But with your individuals that you're mentioning, they already have tremendous amounts of experience, right? They've led teams, they've multiple country organizations, hundreds of employees, or whatever the case may be, even if it's just a smaller team as well. But I would first tell them, number one, you have done the hard part, and do you want to speak? And if they say yes, then it's like, okay, well, let's start looking at their personal brand. One of the questions I have with that I'll ask is, do you have any recorded content in front of a live audience? And for some people, I work with some individuals that, you know, they tell me it's like, hey, I've spoken several times, but I don't really have a lot of content in front of a live audience. And if it is, it's very old or the audio's not that good, the video's not that good. Well, that's an issue because there's two parts in the speaking business. There's the actual talk, the actual message in itself, where I'm assuming for the most part, a lot of these individuals that you're mentioning, we can work with that and we can craft it to make it even better. But at the end of the day, they've learned a lot from their story. They've learned a lot from their experiences. So they're at a point where they could simply share things that they've learned and it can help and impact a lot of people based on what they've been able to accomplish. So that's the actual talk itself. The other side of the speaking side is the marketability piece. So it's like you could be this amazing speaker, give this amazing message, and you have all this experience, but does your online presence match up with that? And if I can't even go online to see a live talk of you in action, well, that's when I recommend getting at least 1 to 3 live talks, recorded, high quality assets on that people can watch, because that's what people really want to know, right? That are outside your network who don't know you. Obviously, people that know who you are, know your expertise, they'll invite you in. Those are the best opportunities and best ways to get speaking. But if you're going more of a cold approach and you're reaching out to people and you want to start really building your book of business as a speaker, you do need to develop some assets. And what I've found is one of the best assets to create, and that has blown up everything for me, was my TEDx talk. Because for me, I was a handshake guy. People that knew me, they loved me. Everything was very relationship based. I really didn't do a lot of marketing. But when I did speak, I had a lot of people that would come up to me and say, Tyler, I really enjoyed the message that you shared. I really liked your energy. How can we get involved? How can we, do business? So again, it was not a lot of people knew me. Where TEDx, they have, over 42 million subscribers. They built a platform that can reach a lot of people. And so if someone wants to do more speaking, one of the things I'll ask is like, have you ever done a TEDx talk? TEDx talk is one of the best ways to showcase your message, showcase your story, showcase your expertise, and then ultimately, share it with a lot of people. Because if you have a message that's true and dear to your heart that can help a lot of people, TEDx is one of the best platforms to do that. And just like anything else, we can now, let's say that's your first recorded talk. Now we can leverage that to get another recorded talk. Now, if we have, let's say, 3 recorded talks, now we can create a highlight reel. We can create a website out of it. Now, just like anything else in any type of business, you slowly build it brick by brick, and then eventually it gets to a point where, people are coming to you, they're finding you online, you have all these assets online. And so it's then making sure that your online presence is in alignment with the message that you share on stage, because at that point, then your branding and your marketing is just going to do all the selling for you. And that's how a client can really accelerate. And then the last thing I will say is it comes back down to the first part, which is the actual talk itself. That's going to be your best marketing. Once you deliver a talk, if not a lot of people are coming up to you or not engaging with you, I would look at that. Is it just because I'm in front of an audience that doesn't resonate with my message and I have to just keep the same message and alter the audience? Because sometimes that's the case. Or is it because I need to enhance my ability to communicate this message and communicate my value add to this organization, to the people in the audience? Because if it's really good, people are going to want to connect with you. They're going to want to come up to you, and they're going to want that next step further. And so then that's just a practice of delivery and the actual message itself, from which we help too. Because the last thing I will say with this, Bill, is just like anything else, and going back to those 2 questions, when I'm asking myself, who am I called to serve? What problems am I called to solve? As a speaker, my keynote presentation is the solution to whatever that problem is, to whatever audience that is. So I need to look at it like that. So it's like, what problems does my keynote actually solve, and for whom does it solve? Because if that's not clear, or I'm in a market where everyone's talking about this solution and how to use AI to grow your business. Let's say there's 20 different speakers. I need to get crystal clear on what's my unique selling proposition, what's going to be different about my message, what's different about my brand. And I have to look at it like that, because one of the examples I always share is, if you were to sell me a vehicle, let's say you sell me a Honda for $15,000 and I can get the same Honda for $10,000 down the road, then we're going to struggle to scale that company, because there's really no unique selling proposition with that. So getting clear with what that is, And again, that's going to be found in your story of what you've experienced, kind of the learning lessons that you have, and also your vision and the values that you have. Because once we culminate all that, now you have a one-on-one message. Now you have a message that only Bill can deliver. It resonates with people. It solves a problem. We have a marketing and branding assets that support that message too. Well, now we really got all pieces of the equation to go out and just continue to impact people's lives and continue to get on more stages, continue to get more content, and continue to just share it with people and send it out to people as well.
Two last questions in my mind, and I might think I reserve the right to think of other questions, but two last questions that were on my mind prior. What's
Sure.
one of your daily or weekly habits that helps you maintain being a speaker's coach or a TEDx expert? What do you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've had people tell me this, like you always have to be speaking, and I speak all the time. I'm always on Zoom calls. I'm always at live events. So for me, I always like to be communicating and speaking. One of the things that I do tell people, and I have shared before, is abiding with the word of Christ every single day. Because I know we're both Christians, and I know some people listening to this have explored that. If you really look at the Bible and the Christian faith, it's the incorruptible seed, right? And if I can allow it to grow within me and I continue to read it and I continue to write the word of Christ and I become more familiar with it, then it's going to start to live within me. And then it's going to want to blossom out and I'm going to want to share and communicate with other people. And so one of the things that I do is study the Bible to then try to find biblical principles that can be applied to business because those are those everlasting principles that stand the test of time, right? Because those are also the keynote messages and the messages and the branding and the companies that you want to work with are the ones that, regardless of what time of year or what year I'm working with you on, or whatever the case may be. In fact, one of the reasons I also went into speaking and help people with their speaking is that people are yearning for human connection, right? Because with AI and technology nowadays, where if you have a software that could just take my photo and we can create a video of it, should I even create the video or should I just use that and just send it to you if it gets me the same objective? And that's a question that the personal user has to make on their own. But in my opinion, people are going to be yearning for that human connection. So having that ability to speak and share your voice and share your story, that's a skill set. And that's going to be something that's going to be far and few in between as we continue to move forward, just because AI and technology is going to want to we want to take your spot to then share your story and share the things that you want to do. And so some of the things I do daily is abiding with the word of Christ, speaking often, and just I'm in it every single day, right? I'm either speaking on a stage or I'm helping someone get on a stage or practice their talk. And so it's really just something that I'm passionate about. And this is something that I invest in on Friday night when, I don't need to be doing anything, right? And so it's really just that process of what I do weekly is making sure that I'm available, that I show up, I'm ready to serve the clients, I'm ready to serve the audience, I'm ready to serve the organization that hires me to speak. I'm always ready. And a part of that is making sure that your mind is right, your energy levels are right, making sure you work out consistently as well. For me, I play basketball 3 to 4 times a week. That's like my unplug slash just relaxation slash cardio. Like it allows me to continue to move forward because if I don't work out or get cardio or play basketball, I get a little edgy. And so I always want to make sure that I'm consistently showing up for myself, showing up for the Lord, showing up for my family, my team members. And as a byproduct, my clients and everyone else gets results too. And so it's just a matter of taking care of your body and making sure that I'm always checking in, having those conversations with the Lord and saying, hey, I feel a little bit worn out this week. What am I doing? Having those honest conversations with the Lord, because it's one of those things where I've learned in business is that, the discipline, again, it doesn't have to always be perfect, but if I'm consistently showing up and I'm consistently asking questions and I'm consistently finding ways to get better, what starts to happen is you're going to start to get better. Things start to slow down a little bit. Things start to get a little bit easier just because you have a little bit more skill set. So always putting in myself in situation rooms and trying to find things that allow me to expand myself. And so, learning, consistently working out, and also just spending time with the word of Christ and praying, I think is a huge piece that if someone isn't doing it, they do that for the next 30 days, it'll change their life because it's definitely changed mine. And it's one thing that I continue to do And even if it's the verse of the day, just read a verse of the day if you're busy, it'll come within them. And then I would even say on top of that is if they want to start writing down the verse of the day, then it really starts to take hold of their life and it really starts to be a part of who they are. Again, if they just write the verse of the day for the next 30 days, every single day, they will see a radical transformation. And that's exactly what I did. And I've never stopped since then. And so that's I would say one of the secret sauces to our success or what we do as well.
So, as we bring this episode of Meet the Speaker to a close, CEOs in the audience watching this on YouTube, watching it on LinkedIn, wherever they may pick it up, are you ready to do two things possibly? One of them would be to hire Tyler to be your keynote speaker. The second one may be that the CEO is ready to improve their communication. And it might not necessarily have to be a TED Talk. It might be they're in front of large groups and they're looking to perfect that message, or they have an annual meeting coming up where the shareholders need to be communicated to in a certain way. And you're there to help them deliver that message with the best outcomes possible, which is really a different kind of gift that you have. So we appreciate that here at CEO Zones. But I want to make sure we know how to get a hold of you. We'll put a little card at the end of the video so your contact information is there, but your phone number is 813-460-1271. Your website is Tyler Cerny, CERNY.com. You're on LinkedIn as Tyler Cerny, the speaker, CEOzones.com. Our website, you're listed as a content partner. All your links are there if that's easier for our audience. Those of you that are online community members as CEOs in the community, Tyler is in our directory. He's got a little trophy next to his profile picture because he is a content partner, and I can't any other way you want to be contacted at that
No,
point.
I think that's good, man. You hit it. People can reach out to me. I always tell people LinkedIn and Instagram are a great way. You can reach out via the website as well. But again, those are all great ways. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, another thing I will add, Bill, too, is CEOs and business owners too. I really want to challenge business owners and CEOs that are listening to this as well to think about their personal brand and how it connects with their story and their organization. And that's really what we focus on too and that's what I found is speaking to be one of the most effective ways to do that is to develop that personal brand for the CEO because it's been all the sacrifices made for the organization, for the clients, the shareholders, X, Y, and Z, where sometimes the CEO gets lost, most people couldn't tell you who the CEO of Starbucks is, right? But they drink it every day. Right. And so it's those CEOs that are developing the personal brands and those individuals, those business leaders where you have a voice, you have a message, share what you know. And if you share what you know, then you're not going to really have to think about what to say because you already know it and you've already lived it.
Excellent.
And, yeah.
Very insightful. Thank you so much for being our guest today. And CEOs, come join us at ceozones.com on the content partner page. Scroll down to the C's, and there will be Tyler's picture. And it does say TED Talk Expert. And then you click on that to get all of his information. Thank you for being with us today, Tyler.
Thank you, Bill.